Welcome back, everyone, to the College Sports Hive. That is Leif and I am Scott Stevens. We're bringing you our Wednesday kind of merged football and news. Preview and news episode for college football for the week. This is week 14 for college football, so we're getting down to the wire here with some of the last games of the conference schedules, and things are getting very interesting. We'll start off today talking about some news that has happened since last time we brought you football stuff. And then we have three games that we'll preview for you today. Our game of the week is going to be number 12, Indiana, taking on number 16, Wisconsin. That's going to be a very interesting matchup in the landscape of the Big Ten for the rest of the season. A really fun one that we have for you is 9-1 Liberty taking on number 18, Coastal Carolina. We've talked about two of these teams a lot in this show of how they're having sort of Cinderella-type seasons, great seasons for both of their programs. We now get to see them play head-to-head, and so it's going to be a really fun one to take in here as well. And then we have number 5 Texas A&M taking on Auburn. And Auburn's actually favored in that matchup, so very interesting to see what's happening there as well. So those are going to be our three games, and as always, we'll do some picks about other games that we don't necessarily give a full-length preview of, but some other games that we think you should have on your dockets for everything moving forward. So without further ado, we'll move into some news, and we'll start off in the Big Ten with some pretty massive news, which makes this very interesting for this Indiana team moving forward. Their star quarterback, Michael Penix Jr., tore his ACL in last week's game against Maryland and will miss the remainder of the season. What do we make of this and their chances moving forward now without Penix?
Oh, I think you've talked about it in other episodes. He's kind of the heartbeat of their team, similar to other big-time quarterbacks. And while he wasn't necessarily as good as of an NFL prospect as other quarterbacks, he meant just as much to his team. And so I think that they've got a competent backup in Jack Tuttle, but Michael Penix brings an element of dynamism and leadership that you just can't replace. So that's a really tough blow for college football as a whole, because Indiana was one of the darlings this year of college football.
Absolutely, for sure. Vanderbilt made a splash. Winless Vanderbilt made a splash in the news this week with their kicker Sarah Fuller became the first female to play in a Division I football game, and this is just a very exciting and very interesting move to take into account. They weren't able to score any points, so she wasn't able to kick an extra point or a field goal for this Vanderbilt team, but she was able to kick the opening kickoff of the second half. It's just very cool to see this happen. It's very groundbreaking in terms of the college football landscape in general. So very inspiring to all women out there to say that this is something that you can do, something, never sell yourself short. So Sarah Fuller, congrats on making history last weekend. And she's actually scheduled to be on the field kicking again this weekend. So some really cool stuff there.
Yeah, no, that's awesome news for the college football landscape and just in the world in general. Sarah Fuller can inspire so many girls to dream of bigger heights and play and be respected for her play. And I think there was a bad reputation of social media bash that kick, and it was perfectly executed. It was intentionally a squib kick. And I mean, I think that there's too much hate in this world, and that she did her job and can inspire so many people to continue dreaming to play their sports that they want to play, whether the community supports it or not. So props to her, and hopefully we see that as a trendsetter and a trailblazer for more to come.
Absolutely. Very well said. Very well said indeed. Ohio State is still in the news this weekend. Their head coach, Ryan Day, will not coach again. So he will not be on the sidelines for their matchup this upcoming weekend against Michigan State, who just is coming off beating Northwestern in a big landmark win for that program. So this game's still kind of up in the air, uncertainty-wise, whether or not Ohio State will be able to compete as a team. But as of right now, it's looking like all systems go for the Buckeyes. But this is a crucial game for them, because if they miss another one coming in and in their last few games of the season, they'll be ineligible to play for the Big Ten championship game, which would be drastic for their chances to make the college football playoffs. So this is very interesting to look at moving forward. Ryan Day is a huge part of that program. He's a great college football coach, a young guy, kind of commands that entire team, very aggressive, and it's definitely a loss without him on the sideline. I'm not necessarily sure it's going to make them a worse team, because they still have the talent. But with that being said, we touched on it with Nick Saban not being there on the sideline. Alabama didn't really lose a step. against Auburn. But with that being said, you never know what's going to happen when something like this goes wrong for a program.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest part is Ohio State desperately needs this game to happen. If they don't get to play this game, I think that's the end of their season effectively, because they've got legitimate college football playoff aspirations and title aspirations. And if you can't play in the Big Ten championship game, I don't think there's a real way they can say, oh, the big Ohio State, who's 4-0 or something, deserves to be in the playoff. So Ohio State's going to be desperately trying to get this to go, and whether Ryan Day is there or not, I think they'll be very motivated because they know this every game is impacting their season.
For sure. We're gonna have some fun here in this little landscape here. We got some us speculating a little bit on where things are at. The Heisman Trophy is one of the most coveted celebrations of an individual season in college football, and it's one of those things that to win, you're kind of cemented in college football history as one of the best players of that time. So with that being said, let me hear your top 5 Heisman Trophy contenders as we sit right now throughout this entire season.
All righty. So I got number 1. I think he's the lead guy, Kyle Trask, QB of Florida. He's having a phenomenal season. Number 2, I'm going Najee Harris for Alabama. And I think that's a controversial one because Mac Jones is also having a phenomenal year, and quarterback's a more important position, but I think Najee Harris is the better player on those two teams. Number 3, I've got Trevor Lawrence. I think those games he's missed are hurting him in this. He's been phenomenal, but he hasn't played enough to prove to voters that he deserves it. Number 4, I have the aforementioned Mac Jones, who's leading the number 1 team in the country. And I don't think he'll win the award just because there's a better player on his offense than himself, but he's having a great year. And number 5, I got a little sneaky pick. I got Zach Wilson of BYU. It's not his fault they're playing subpar opponents, and their ranking shouldn't reflect on how great a season he's had. So that's my top 5.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of those names for sure. I also have Kyle Trask slotted in at number 1. He's just been playing tremendous football all year long, ahead of numbers that were record-setting by Joe Burrow last year for the SEC and for all of college football. So as of right now, he's breaking those numbers and those marks. So as long as he continues any sort of reasonable pace throughout the remainder of his games, he's going to have a record-breaking and setting year. So very impressive performances out of Kyle Trask. I actually have Trevor Lawrence slotted in at number 2. I know he's missed some games, but when you break down what that trophy actually means to the individual player, is you are the best player on that team and in college football in general. And I think just the absence that you saw out of Clemson when Trevor Lawrence wasn't playing, and then he comes back and plays, and they are just back to their steamroller mentality and one of the best teams in the country. I mean, it's very evident that he is what makes Clemson go as of right now. And so I just think, yes, his stats are going to be a little less because he wasn't able to play in all of their games, and that's going to hurt his chances of winning the trophy. But I think when you break it down of who's the most important to either their team or even their conference and even college football in general, I think you have to put Trevor Lawrence, if not number 1, right behind number 1 in that kind of scheme of things. I actually have Najee Harris number 3 because it's the exact same argument. He is the most important player for Alabama. He makes everything else on that offense go. Mac Jones wouldn't be having the year he'd be having if it wasn't for Najee Harris, his ability to run the football. So I'll put him at number 3. I'm actually not super stoked at where I put Justin Fields at number 4, but once again, just when he's healthy and when he's there on the field making plays for that Ohio State team, you can't say he's not one of the best players in the nation. So I'm going to slot him in there at number 4. His stats, once again, are going to be lower. And his performance against Indiana kind of brought me back down to level about him. I would have probably put him number 1 or number 2 if he didn't have such a mediocre performance against Indiana in their biggest game. So that's why he's in there at kind of number 4. And then Mac Jones rounds out my top 5. The only reason I left off Zach Wilson for all of you out there that will be wondering that question is not necessarily the level of competition that he's played. It's along the lines of, yes, you've been playing lesser competition, and yes, you've been having great stat lines, but I just think these players ahead of you have shown more against better competition. rather than Justin Wilson, who's had great stat lines against bad competition. But then you see these guys like Kyle Trask, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields doing this week after week after week against top level competition in their conferences. It's just, for me, it's too much to slot Zach Wilson in there and compare him to them. If we had a couple bigger matchups with Zach Wilson, he threw for over 350 and 3 touchdowns, sure, absolutely. But that just brings me back down a little bit to normalcy against around Zach Wilson there for sure. All right,
Yeah,
Leif.
no, I that argument. I just want to give one quick thought about Fields and why I didn't put him in there, because that's the obvious one I didn't put in. I think his performance against Indiana was his big game to play well. He had to have a signature moment. He had to be otherworldly in all of his games to be the Heisman based on playing a shortened season. And I think in the biggest game so far, he came up short in terms of what a Heisman favorite should be doing. And that's not to say he's not a great quarterback, and I firmly believe he's the top 2 player in college football. But in terms of the Heisman Award, he hasn't played enough games, and he would have to have 4 or 5 absolutely ridiculous games. And because he's only played 4 games and 3 of them were great and 1 was notably pretty poor for his standards, I'll just go with the track record of Zach Wilson playing 8 or 9 games all very well.
Absolutely. I think there's no real wrong answer as to who you slide in there. I think there's plenty of cases that you can build around both players. Just basically what you believe weighs more and matters more in terms of who they've played, where they've played, things like that, and all of that good stuff. So definitely all of these guys are insanely talented and deserve that recognition. Just who it's going to vary person to person on what you view as more important, essentially. So with that being said, the second college football playoff rankings were released last night. Pretty much the same top 6 that we saw after the first week, top 7, excuse me, no real fluctuation there. Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, Ohio State are the 4 that would be in if it started right now. Texas A&M, Florida would be the first 2 out, and then Cincinnati slots in there at number 7 as well. An interesting move is Georgia's all the way back up to number 8 with their emergence of JT Daniels at quarterback and making that offense a little bit more explosive. We kind of touched on it earlier with some of their matchups. Like if they were to just stick with that and were to go to that, where could this team be at right now with what's happening with how they've been crushing people now that Daniels is in there, making them effective passing the football?
I genuinely think they probably would have beaten Alabama in that first matchup of the first big SEC matchup. And that seems crazy now because Alabama's getting better and better, but they were vulnerable then. Georgia was winning at half in that game, despite a poor performance from Stetson Bennett. They're creating trouble for Mac Jones, slowing down Najee Harris. And if they just had consistency out of a quarterback, I think Florida and Alabama at least would have been toss-up games rather than them being compromised by poor quarterbacking play. But I'm happy to see them at 8 because they are a better team than some of the people they were behind previously.
Absolutely. Another interesting move is Iowa State's also into the top 10 now after some of their good fortunes this week after beating Texas, and then a loss from another Big 12 school essentially made them already locked into the Big 12 championship game. So they're slotted in there at number 9 now. What do we make of this Iowa State team?
I think they're really well coached by Matt Campbell, and they have good quarterback play, a solid defense, and we talked about last time, their trio of Brock Purdy, Breece Hall, and Charlie Kolar is one of the better ones in the country, and they have a defense in the Big 12 that's not typically known for defense that is capable of stopping people, and that's a recipe for success in that conference.
For sure. Northwestern has slid down from number 8 last week to number 14 after their loss to Michigan State. BYU slotted in there at number 13 again. They moved up 1 slot. It's just, again, I think it's just the same kind of deal. They didn't play a game last week. They didn't have any real message to the committee that said we're better. I think it's going to take either a couple big losses from people ahead of them or them scheduling a couple more games to say, hey, and some landmark games of some notoriety and saying we're good.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think their only hope is getting some Power 5 school. It doesn't even have to be an elite one. We both have advocated for Cincinnati and BYU to play each other. I think that'll be great for both programs. But they desperately need to schedule some Power 5 school.
For sure. For sure. So a couple interesting things. Washington has now slid into the top 25 in the college football rankings. They're sitting there at 3-0 after their comeback win over Utah last weekend. Um, they're actually now ahead of Oregon, who lost against Oregon State. So Washington slides in at 22. Oregon's in there at 23. We touched on who would be another Pac-12 conference team that would be ranked this season. We both kind of agreed that if Colorado could beat USC, they're that team. But also, we never really thought that this Washington team under Jimmy Lake up there now would be one of those in contention to really be. Now they probably have one of the best chances other than USC to make the football playoff, which is still slim to almost none.
I'd be absolutely stunned if the Pac-12 gets a representative this year, but I think Jimmy Lake's doing a good job. Their defense played well against Utah, causing those turnovers, and their quarterback's inexperienced and probably will grow as the season goes along. I think they have a chance to remain in the poll.
Yeah, I think they are just growing, like you touched on, under Jimmy Lake, and they're only going to get better. Interestingly, after losing to Notre Dame, North Carolina moved up in the polls. They're now at number 17 after that good performance against the Irish. So that's fun to watch as well. I think they are a legitimate contender. I know they have 3 losses now, but that was a good loss to a good Notre Dame team. And I think that pretty much sums up the big moves in the playoff rankings. Do you have anything else you want to touch on before we move on to some previews?
No, I think that covers it. I think that the one thing to watch for is the consistency of the committee for a team like Northwestern, like you touched on, going down to 14. We want to see if any of those teams that are ranked above Northwestern, when they were at 8, were to lose, if they'd slide similarly. But I think the committee is at least showing, hey, if you win big games, then you move up, and that's what we saw with Iowa State moving up a few. So I have no gripes with it, the rankings.
Speaking of big games, our game of the week is a massive one in the scale of the Big Ten for the rest of the season. Number 12, Indiana, is 5-1 on the season. Their only loss coming to Ohio State in the Horseshoe. And then number 16, Wisconsin, is 2-1 on their season after a lot of their games being canceled due to COVID issues on both sides, first off their program and then other programs as well. This is massive because Wisconsin's uneligible to play in the Big Ten Conference championship game. And Indiana, if Ohio State isn't able to go and play, they're going to probably be the Big Ten East representative in that game. So this is a game that really is, we touched on, a legitimacy prover for Indiana in this matchup. And we touched on Penix Jr.'s out for this game after tearing his ACL. So they're relying on Jack Tuttle to lead this program for this huge landmark win over Wisconsin. This game's going to kick off at 3:30 Eastern time on ABC. What do we make of this matchup?
I mean, I think it's a great matchup, and I really wish Penix could play, because this would be such a contrasting styles. Like, Indiana runs the ball well with Stevie Scott, but Wisconsin runs the ball, and Indiana likes to air it out. We saw him against Ohio State throw the ball 50 times and throw for nearly 500 yards. So it'll be interesting to see how Tuttle plays. He's a transfer from the University of Utah. He was 5 of 5 for 36 yards, replacing Michael Penix Jr. Obviously, a really small sample size. They've got really good receivers on the outside, Ty Freifogel and Walt Fillier. And it'll be so interesting to me to see how, if at all, they change their game plan, because they like to air it out and they like to be opportunistic on defense. But Wisconsin, in all odds, will not have as poor of a quarterbacking performance from Graham Mertz as they did against Northwestern. They'll run the ball effectively, as they always do. So what will Indiana do to be able to put pressure on the Wisconsin team to do more than just run and make Graham Mertz uncomfortable, I think, is the biggest question in this game to me.
Yeah, I think exactly that, because you saw Ohio State was able to run consistently against this Indiana front six. And so you look at Master Teague, he's a huge running back for Ohio State. But then again, they gave up 6, 7, 8 yards a carry before he was even touched. So I think Indiana's got to have a big answer for the running game in this one, and not give up 5 or 6 yards a carry to this Wisconsin team, because if Wisconsin's averaging 6 yards a carry, this game might be over before it even starts. But with that being said, I do think Indiana's secondary is one of the most talented in the country. We saw them force Justin Fields into a lot of bad decisions, making opportunistic plays, like you said. I do think if Graham Mertz is going to need to win this game for Wisconsin, I would side on the side of Indiana's secondary to not let that happen, especially with his performance against Northwestern. It was just sloppy, a couple bad throws here and there. Really didn't look like the quarterback we saw throughout their first 2 games of the season. So with that being said, I do know he's dynamic, he's young, he's going to make mistakes, but I just think this Indiana secondary is legit, and they can cause a lot of problems and really set up their offense in situations where they can succeed.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is for Indiana to me is their defense has to. I mean, so their offense has to allow for their defense to be good. They can't put them in compromised positions, give short fields to Indiana. Jack Tuttle has to keep Wisconsin, excuse me. Jack Tuttle has to take care of the ball and not allow turnovers like we saw. And obviously it was a poor performance by Joe Milton in Michigan, but that game against Wisconsin, his first 2 throws were effectively pick sixes. It was 14-0 in a blink of an eye, and you're not going to come back against a Wisconsin team. You have to do what Northwestern did and make them come from behind and make them throw the ball and not have a running game take over. And Wisconsin's defense is really talented. So this is a tough first initiation for Jack Tuttle. And I wonder how much of Stevie Scott they rely on, how many shorter throws rather than the dynamic rollouts that you see from Penix deep to Freifogel against an amazing Ohio State team. So I think their game plan has to be altered and have to try to win a defensive slugfest rather than a shootout.
Absolutely, I would totally agree. I think it's going to be really interesting to see if Jack Tuttle's even remotely close to the ability of finding those receivers downfield like Michael Penix was, because that was what made that offense so dynamic and so different to anything that Ohio State had seen in that matchup. You had guys running free against the talented Ohio State secondary. So, I mean, I do think that Indiana's wide receivers are extremely talented and are going to be able to get open in this game. It's going to be whether or not Jack Tuttle can put it on them. And I think it's going to be really evident early on if you see Tuttle overthrowing guys, underthrowing guys deep, and if he's able to establish his confidence and establish a rhythm, I think Indiana has a good chance of winning this game, even though they're given a very slim percentage point and via the ESPN FPI. But I do think it's going to be very vindicative of what happens if Tuttle's able to complete some passes early and get his confidence up.
Yeah, absolutely. I was stunned by the FBI. I thought that even without Penix, that this was more of a toss-up, especially because Wisconsin's only played 3 games. They don't have the continuity of a veteran team that you'd expect from a Wisconsin team. And Indiana's been impressive. Tom Allen's got their bunch playing hard, even in losses, even without Penix. They're going to come out fighting. So I was surprised by that, and I guess we'll see what happens and see if they know best.
Absolutely, that's going to kick off at 3:30 Eastern time on ABC. There in Madison, 84.1% chance of victory for Wisconsin. That's a huge number via the ESPN FPI. So 5-1 Indiana taking on 2-1 Wisconsin. Huge game in the Big Ten on Saturday there. Another really fun one that we get to talk about now is 9-1 Liberty traveling to number 18 Coastal Carolina. Coastal's undefeated so far in their season. They're sitting at 9-0. 2 p.m. Eastern time kickoff on ESPNU. This is the first ever college game day appearance at Coastal Carolina. The whole game day crew is going to set up shop early, bring us all the news, all exactly what they do best. It's a tremendous exposure opportunity for this Coastal Carolina program. Really good to see for this team that's having one of their best years in school history.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only is this big for their football program, but it's good for the diversity of people watching football. They're going to be like, oh, who is this team? And they're going to learn about a really quality team that they're probably laughing off seeing at number 18 in the polls. And Liberty's also a great team. So they've been at Camp Randall so many times, which is Wisconsin's home stadium for everyone. And so going to a new place in Myrtle Beach, I'm sure is going to be fun. It's not probably nicer weather than it is up in Camp Randall. And the Chanticleers for Coastal Carolina are a legitimately good football team.
Absolutely. They're kind of led by this Grayson McCall, their quarterback. He's 117 of 174 for 1,747 yards on the season. An interesting stat line that stands out to me, at least, is 20 touchdowns compared to 1 interception. He's very much taken care of the ball so far this season, and that's really going to have to be the case this week against Liberty. Liberty has a dynamic quarterback, and this is a super interesting quarterback matchup to watch. Malik Willis is on the other side for Liberty. He has over 2,000 yards already passing, 2,040 yards, 20 TDs as well, compared to 4 interceptions. And a lot of this, they've played 3 ACC schools already on their year. So a lot of this is against pretty solid competition for Liberty. So very interesting, this matchup here to look forward to. And what's going to stand out to you here in probably the most important matchup of the game?
Yeah, I think that matchup, like you said, it's who takes care of the ball better, and both have great touchdown to interception ratios. I mean, 20-1 and 20-4 is great. Not to mention 10 rushing touchdowns by Malik Willis. I think one of the bigger things is who can create uncomfortable moments for the other team, because a lot of games Coastal Carolina's cruised. I think Liberty's more battle tested because they've played those ACC schools. They've squeaked out some tough wins. They've lost some heartbreakers. And Coastal Carolina's played a few close ones, and they've had big plays at big moments from their defense. But I think that Liberty's more battle tested. However, Coastal Carolina is super efficient. I mean, 20 touchdowns to 1 interception. They've got CJ Maribel. Their running back has nearly 600 yards, 8 touchdowns, and they also have 2 other rushers with 5 or more rushing touchdowns. So that's great. Great versatility. They've got bad backfield that'll make some plays. They'll take care of the ball, and I think it's whoever can make 1 interception, 1 forced fumble, a big special teams play should be advantaged in this game.
Absolutely. It's super interesting to look at. I said it's going to be a great quarterback matchup, but you also are looking at teams that are averaging over 220. In this case, Liberty has over 250 yards per game on the ground. So clearly they want to establish the run. I think a lot of that stat is a little bit skewed for Liberty because a lot of those are drop back passes where Malik Willis scrambles around and runs for yardage. He has 807 rushing yards already on the season on 120 carries, more so than their running back does. So this is a guy that does it with his arm and his legs. So a very explosive guy to and hard to bring down and hard to maintain in the pocket. So I think that's going to be a huge thing for Coastal is if they're able to keep Willis in the pocket and make him beat him with his arm, I think they have a great chance in this game. But with that being said, if he's on the loose and running and doing what he does best of just making crazy plays happen, I might side Liberty on this one. I don't know. It's going to be a great matchup for sure.
Yeah, Coastal Carolina desperately needs like a big breakout performance from a linebacker, maybe to spy Willis or create some turnovers with excess pressure because it's comfortable. Like you said, that could spell doom for a really nice undefeated season that I personally hope continues, just because we've been rooting for them all year, and it's a true Cinderella, and I want them to keep dancing.
Absolutely, 100%. It's really interesting to see also with Liberty, though. They have Joshua Mack and Peyton Pickett, who are 2 running backs that also have over 500 yards apiece running the football. 6 touchdowns for Pickett and 4 for Mack. So really diverse there in the running game. And then they have a bunch of guys that can catch the football as well. A good trio of wide receivers, DJ Stubbs, Kevin Shaw, and Demario Douglas all have over 3 touchdowns on the year and over 300 yards receiving. So I think you look at this Liberty team, they have all the playmakers that they can have to potentially score more than the 16.7 points per game that Coastal's allowing on their defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it'll be a low scoring game at all in this one.
Yeah, it's gonna be super interesting to see what happens. I think Isaiah Likely is gonna play a huge factor in this. He has 17 catches for 423 yards. That's an average of 24.5 yards per reception, as well as 4 touchdowns on the year. So a really fun one here with 2 explosive offenses that can really make it happen on ESPNU. Well, do you have anything else to add on this game before we move on?
No, I think we covered it all, and just expect a good one and some names you don't know to be household names after this week.
Absolutely. A huge matchup for both of these programs. It could be a landmark win for Liberty, landmark win for Coastal Carolina to keep their season going. Liberty's been ranked inside the top 25 multiple times this year. They just fell out of the rankings 2 weeks ago after a tough loss to NC State. So it's a very legitimate team as well. So this is a very good legitimacy test for both of these schools. Absolutely. Moving forward. ESPN FBI giving Coastal Carolina an 80% chance of victory, which I think is way too high. But we're gonna make the most of that one. All right, moving on to number 5, Texas A&M is 6-1 on the year. They are dangerously close to making the college football playoff if a couple things happen ahead of them, and they're traveling to Auburn, who's 5-3 on their year, to take on the Tigers. What do we make of this game in the SEC?
Well, this is a make or break for the Aggies. They've been probably the quietest 5 seed I've ever seen in a college football playoff poll. They've remained 5 every week, and they seemingly haven't played much at all since they've got that one win against Florida. The Aggies are pretty. They do a good job of mixing it up. They've got an explosive quarterback in Kellen Mond who's got about 1,600 yards, 16 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Does a good job taking care of the ball. And then an explosive running back who ran all over that Florida defense in that big marquee matchup to the tune of, he's got 130 carries and 784 yards, 6 touchdowns on the season. And they've got another complimentary back in Ines Smith who's got 29 catches out of the backfield, 348 yards and 5 touchdowns. So they have a lot of talent all around their team. And they need to have the best performance of their year to stay alive for the season because they've been treading closely. And Auburn is a talented team. Bo Nix, we've talked about, he was crowned the Messiah of Auburn, and that wasn't necessarily fair, but he's more than capable of winning this game. And they've got talent on both sides of the ball that will make this hard for Kellen Mond and company.
Yeah, I personally think this is the biggest test left for Texas A&M on their schedule. They are sitting there very quietly at 6-1. Their only loss coming to Alabama, so they will not be able to. They probably will not play in the SEC championship game, which is interesting because Alabama will take that slot in the SEC West, unless a loss. They would need Alabama to lose twice, which I don't necessarily see that happening with Alabama's remaining schedule. But with that being said, if Florida loses if Florida loses to Alabama in the SEC championship game, that's a 2-loss Florida team that will probably, and you've already seen Texas A&M beat that Florida team, so that conversation's out of it. And then you have Notre Dame and Clemson, who are probably going to play each other again. And if Clemson beats Notre Dame, then they're both going to go. But if Notre Dame beats Clemson again, Clemson's not going to play for the college football playoff. And then you're sitting there looking at Ohio State, who, if they miss one more game, won't play for the Big Ten championship game. So you're looking at these scenarios and you're saying there's a whole heck of a lot of chance that Texas A&M, if they remain undefeated, is going to play in the college football playoff. So it's very interesting to take all of this in and see what's happening with this team that we haven't really given a whole lot of attention to because they haven't been able to play some of these games due to COVID issues in their own program, which doesn't necessarily matter to them because they're not even going to play in the SEC championship game anyway. So they could be a team that doesn't play for the SEC championship game and benefits because they didn't. So it's a very interesting situation and very fluid to see what's going on there. This is a good Auburn team. Like we said, they have talent on offense. Bo Nix just needs to have a good performance in this one, in my opinion, to make this a challenge for Texas A&M. Bo Nix can throw the ball, and he's very athletic running the ball. I think they just need to get him involved early with easy plays. Like, just don't try and do too much, and he's going to get some confidence up and then try and force the ball downfield with Seth Williams, Anthony Schwartz, some of these guys that are dynamic in the pass game. They just need to get him the ball. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they need to give him the 10 script plays that almost every team has. They have 10 set plays entering a game. I think they try to force the ball down the field, and they end up going with a 3 and out, and it ruins momentum and it causes the defense to play from behind, and then the offense has to throw. They become more one-dimensional. One big thing for them is Tank Bigsby going to play? Tank Bigsby is an explosive running back. He runs so hard, and he lives up to his name, Tank. And if he's able to play, this really allows them to utilize the run game to open up the pass game, some run pass options, getting Bo Nix's legs involved, which then leads to his arms. They become so much better when he plays. So if he plays, look for Texas A&M to be in trouble, because their defense has been less than spectacular, and their offense has been solid. But you don't really want to get in a shootout with a team that has the weapons Auburn does.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Tank Bigsby is still deemed as questionable as of right now on this Wednesday before that huge matchup. He has 103 carries, 586 yards, and 5 touchdowns on the year. Like Leif said, he just basically makes that team go offensively. With that being said, though, I think it's very indicative of Bo Nix, what's going to happen in the first bit of this football game. I think I can't harp on it enough. We've said what's wrong with Bo Nix, all of these things. He was supposed to be Auburn's golden child, all of these crazy things, comparisons to Cam Newton, and all of this stuff. And he absolutely festered all of that hype in early with his game against Oregon in that opening season game where he beat the Ducks with a game-winning drive in a huge matchup that inevitably kept Oregon out of the college football playoff. And so now he's just deemed to be having a terrible year when he's over 1,800 yards passing, and he has 10 touchdowns. So, I mean, yes, the 7 interceptions are bad. He needs to take care of the football. He's just trying to do too much to live up to those high expectations that were set for him.
Yeah, no, I think he's gotten a bad reputation for being over advertised initially. But one thing that I think will really help him is if they get Seth Williams involved earlier in games. I think they try to force him the ball, make too many difficult throws. He's such a playmaker. Run a little 12-yard back shoulder, get him the ball, get a little momentum. And no one wants Seth Williams when he's fully engaged. He's one of the best receivers in the SEC and in the conference. I mean, in the nation, excuse me. And then maybe get some end arounds to Anthony Schwartz. He's got top end speed, absolutely elite speed. You need to utilize that speed more so and make life easier for Bo Nix, regardless of Tank Bigsby's playing or not.
100%. These wide receivers are so talented. Seth Williams is a huge factor in this football game. He can take the top off of a defense, as can Anthony Schwartz, but Schwartz has more catches on the year than Seth Williams. The fact that Seth Williams only has 36 catches through their 8 games is just not okay for this Auburn team. You got to get him more involved. You got to run him in slants, quick outs, back shoulder throws like you touched on, things that get him in the flow of the game. Because if you're just relying on a receiver to make a big play 2 or 3 times a game and score you a touchdown, that's not going to work. That's not sustainable for this Auburn offense. So I think they need to be a little bit more creative in their play calling, a little bit more aggressive early on. Not necessarily – that doesn't mean take shots downfield. That means – quick passes, play with tempo, play with these things that can allow this offense to be like, oh yeah, we know how to do this. We're good at this game. And then allow that to translate to their defense and allow them to make stops over this Texas A&M team who, like we said, their 2 leading pass catchers are a running back and a tight end. So they need some receivers to step up big in this one as well. And I think this is going to be a very close game. Clearly the FBI figures that because they're giving Auburn the edge at 53.1% chance.
It's really interesting. I looked at a sports book, and they're favoring Texas A&M by 7 points, and ESPN's projecting Auburn to win by 53-47. Obviously, narrow margins there, but a 7-point spread for this type of matchup when the other team's projected to win by FBI is pretty odd. So obviously, it's going to be an interesting one, and one that either team could win very easily.
For sure. I think a huge part of this is if Texas A&M can sustain their ability to run the football. Kellen Mond can run it. Isaiah Spiller is a fantastic running back. If they can run on Auburn, it might be ugly. But with that being said, I just think Auburn comes out ready to play. This game's at home. They're 5-3 on the year. They have a chance to get to 6-3 and beat a really, really good Texas A&M team. So I just think you're going to see a very, very motivated Auburn team coming out in this one to try and spring this upset over a really good Texas A&M team who this is probably their hardest game on their schedule, so they'll be ready to go as well. It's going to be a really fun one there. Auburn, Alabama. That game's in Auburn, Alabama, It's going to kick off at noon Eastern on ESPN. So a couple really good noon games to watch out for. And that segments me beautifully into our picks segment. We've now arrived at that fun time in our episodes here. The other fantastic noon game that's going to kick off on ABC is number 4 Ohio State, shorthanded, as surely shorthanded, as well as not having Ryan Day, traveling to Michigan State, who just upset the number 8 team in the country, Northwestern. What do we make of this game that's going to kick off on ABC, and who you got?
Well, it's a weird game because I don't know exactly who's playing for Ohio State, and obviously, if you're missing Justin Fields, that's a huge thing. So I'm gonna assume Fields is playing, and I'm gonna take Ohio State. I think I've talked about regression to the mean a few times. I think he's gonna have a better game than he had against Indiana because Indiana's defense is really good, and I don't think he played that well. And I think Michigan State's defense isn't of the caliber of Indiana. And so I'm going to bank on the experienced quarterback and all the playmakers, whether they're all healthy or not. They've got boatloads of talent. So I'm going to take Ohio State. And then also the regression to the mean works the other way as well. I think Michigan State's riding a high. They played a great game against Northwestern, but I think Ohio State's too talented and they've got too much at stake. If they can play this game, they have to win to have the chance. So I'm gonna go with the Buckeyes.
Yeah, there's a lot riding on this for Ohio State. Absolutely. With that being said, I'm going to go with the Spartans. It's going to be against the grain for sure, but I'm going to pick Michigan State in this game. We saw Ohio State play Indiana after they had their game against Maryland canceled, and they didn't look good. I mean, there's something to be said about lack of practice, lack of regular warm-ups, lack of all of these things that you miss in a regular game week. And you saw Justin Fields not play his best football game. Like you said, we don't know who's going to suit up for Ohio State. They could be missing a whole bunch of people. So with that being said, I'm going to roll with the Spartans, who are really high on their motivation after just beating a very good Northwestern team. Rocky Lombardi can make plays at quarterback. So I'm going to roll with the Spartans without Ryan Day at head coach. Just all things pointing towards the upset. And so that means Michigan State just going to get run out of the gym and blown out. But we'll roll with the Spartans in this one.
I definitely don't dislike that pick. I just think that if Fields is good to go, I think that's good enough.
Yeah, that was going to be one of the things I added on though. Is if Fields plays, it's going to be ugly for the Spartans for sure. All right, Texas at Kansas State, another noon Eastern kickoff on Fox. Who you got in this one?
I think in Sam Ehlinger's final games, I think he's gonna have a good performance. He wants to have a nice send off from the Texas program he did so much for. I don't think they're phenomenally motivated after that loss to Iowa State, but I'm going to take them. I'm going to take them to win and prove Ehlinger, just help him carry out his legacy at Texas.
Yeah, they're playing for a lot still, though, Texas. They have 3 losses, but they still, you never know, a couple losses from Oklahoma and Oklahoma State ahead of them in the Big 12. They could see themselves rematching with Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game. All of that's kind of stacked together. There's no divisions breaking down into the Big 12, so they're all just slated in there. So they just need a few losses and a few wins. So I think it would be a huge win to beat Skylar Thompson and Kansas State. So I'm going to roll with Texas as well. They still have a lot to play for. Ehlinger, like you said, is going to come out motivated to go. I got Texas in this one as well. A game we just previewed for all of you, number 5, Texas A&M at Auburn, noon Eastern on ESPN. Who you got in this one?
Man, I've gone a few different ways in my head here, but I think I'm going to go with Texas A&M because I don't know if Tank Bigsby's playing. And if he were, I'd feel very, very tempted to take Auburn. But if he does, I feel like he'll be limited. He's missed a lot of time, and the Auburn offense has misutilized some of their weapons. And if they were to utilize them correctly, it'd be a horribly dangerous opponent to a Texas A&M team that really doesn't have an unrealistic shot to make it into the playoff. However, they didn't play a great game against LSU. I think they're going to have a bounce-back game and play better offensively. Kellen Mond was 11 of 34, and that won't happen again. He's too good for that. Isaiah Spiller carried them in that game, and I think he can carry them, like you said at the end of when we were previewing this one. If Isaiah Spiller gets going, it could spell trouble for Auburn, and I think that's what'll happen. It's a very close game in my mind, but I'm going to go with the Aggies.
It's a great pick. I have a really hard time picking against Texas A&M, but I did say to you earlier this week that either Ohio State or Texas A&M will lose this weekend. And last time I said that was with Indiana playing Ohio State and Northwestern playing Wisconsin. Those are 2 high-profile matchups. And I picked the wrong one last time when that happened. So I can't be wrong again if I pick both of them to happen is my logic inside my head. So I do believe that either Texas A&M or Ohio State goes down this week. There's just a lot swirling around that Ohio State program and a lot on the rise for Michigan State. With that being said, I do think Auburn's a fantastic football team with a ton of talent. Texas A&M looked shaky at times last week against LSU coming off COVID leave and all of that stuff. I do expect them to play a much better game, and it's going to take Auburn's best to beat them. But give me Auburn in this one, and we'll see which upset happens. I'll be praying for both of them. So I told you we're gonna get some crazy picks this week, and we're off to a strong start through 3.
Yeah, no, I like that pick. I was extremely tempted, and actually I went and checked the document to see what you had there, and I was like, if we're going to disagree, I might as well send it here because I was almost going to take Auburn. So I like that pick. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Absolutely. I know a one that I know is a painful one for Leif here. We got Stanford taking on number 22 Washington. I see the pick is blank on the document. That means he doesn't know what he's doing yet. So we're going to see the gears spinning in his brain. That's going to kick off at 4 p.m. Eastern time on Fox. This is a Washington team that's good. They're getting some national notoriety in this one. Who do you got here between these two Pac-12 North schools?
It hurts me, but I think I have to go with Washington because they run the ball really well. Stanford's got a really bad running defense. If it gets into a throwing game, I actually like Stanford's odds. I think Davis Mills is a lot better at quarterback than Washington. He's got a really good arm, but the defense is what lets Stanford down. I think if they establish the run game, it makes the game so much easier for Washington. And then as for Washington's defense, which is what they're better at, they provide a lot of pass pressure. And as much as I say Davis Mills is a good throw of the football, he is not very good at avoiding the rush. He seems to take a lot of sacks that he doesn't need to, and that doesn't bode well against some of the pass rushers that absolutely terrorize the Utes pass rush, O-line, and Jake Bentley. So I'm going to go with Washington, but I kind of hope, like in basketball, I bet against Stanford because I thought they were limited in practice, and Stanford won. So go Card. Win this game. I'm rooting for you still, but I'm picking Washington.
I love it. I'm going to go with the Huskies as well. I just think they have too much talent on both sides of the ball for this Stanford team. Like you touched on, they run the ball really, really well. Also, Puka Nacua is a horrifying target on the outside, as well as the tight end for Washington. They got a ton of talent on both sides. I'll take the Huskies here to improve to 4-0 on their year. Another fun one in the Pac-12. Colorado is now 3-0 in their season as well. They're taking on Arizona, 7 p.m. Eastern time on FS1. Who you got in this matchup?
I'm going with the Buffaloes. I think they've got a really nice 1-2 punch in Jarek Broussard and Sam Neuer. They do a really good job mixing it up, run pass. Neuer is really athletic as well, so they run pass option. We saw that Arizona against Washington was able to be ran all over. And I think that spells good luck for Colorado. I think Graham Gunnell's a really good quarterback though for Arizona, and they're susceptible through the air. But I think ultimately the time of possession that Colorado probably will have in favor of them in this game will get them the victory.
Yeah, I'm going to go Colorado as well. I just think they have too much talent on both sides. Arizona did play really hard and really well against USC, but I'll take the Buffs in this one. Number 3, Clemson is traveling to Virginia Tech, 7:30 Eastern time. Herbie and Fowler on the call there on ABC. Who you got in this one between Clemson and Virginia Tech?
I'm going Clemson, and no shock there. I've said it before, and I will say again, Trevor Lawrence is the best player in college football. I think he's out to prove something. He wants to have a little Heisman push. I think Virginia Tech's a pretty good team. They played Miami really well, and they have a defense that got some athleticism, but their offense isn't very good, and you have to be able to score a ton against Trevor Lawrence-led Clemson. Even DJ was able to put up a lot of points, and that is no slight to DJ. Just Trevor Lawrence is a phenomenal player, and I think they're gonna win this game pretty handily.
For sure. I'm going to go Clemson as well. I think this is a huge spotlight for Trevor Lawrence to kind of shine and say, listen, I missed a few games, but I'm still one of the best players in college football. I think he has a tremendous performance, and I think Clemson's going to dismantle Virginia Tech in this one. I'd bet Clemson big here for sure. Same could be said personally, in my opinion, here in this one. Number 1, Alabama is traveling to LSU, 8 p.m. Eastern on CBS. It's a very good, interesting matchup. Last year, LSU kind of stuck it to Alabama with Joe Burrow and all that happening. So what are we seeing this one? between the number one team in the country and one of their rivals.
No, I agree with you. I think Alabama is going to dominate this game. I think their defense is only getting better, and that is not a welcome sight for a young, struggling TJ Finley. Not to mention that they've got Najee Harris, Mac Jones, and Devontae Smith. So that's I think they've got too much firepower, and their defense is getting better. So I don't think this is going to be particularly close. I'm going with Bama.
Yeah, I'm going Bama here as well. I think it's going to be ugly. I think Mac Jones, Najee Harris, Devontae Smith, just too much for all of these defenses in the SEC. I just don't see a way that LSU is able to really compete here. They don't score enough, and their defense is suspect at best. So I think you saw Texas A&M be able to run all over them last weekend. So I'm going to go with Alabama and Najee Harris to be able to do the same, even though it's in Death Valley. I'll take Bama big again on 8 p.m. Eastern time on CBS for that one. Liberty, really fun one. I still have IDK on the docket here. Liberty traveling to number 18 Coastal Carolina. Going to kick off at 2 p.m. Eastern time on ESPNU. Who you got in this one and why?
I mean, I might as well have put an IDK as well. I think Liberty's played better opponents, which bodes well for them. I think that it being in Coastal Carolina, I think the College Game Day, I think they're going to put on a show. And we've talked about Coastal all year, so I'm rolling with Coastal. I think that the 20-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio for them is going to play a huge factor. They take care of the ball. And even in one slip up, they're going to take care of the ball. They've proved to make some big plays on defense, and this will be the best team they've played all year. So if they're able to score and take care of the ball, I think they have a really good chance. And I really hope they have a good linebacker to take care of Willis, because that is dangerous.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know on the docket here, but I think I have made up my mind. I'm going to take Liberty in this one. I'm going to give me Malik Willis, give me that quarterback with the dual threat potential to extend plays, make plays happen with his feet in particular. I think he's made a few more mistakes, but once, like you touched on, they've played better teams. They've played better defenses so far than Coastal has. It pains me a lot because I love to see this run Coastal Carolina's on, and I just think if Liberty beats them, you're not going to have to see any of them in the top 25 anymore. So that stinks to see, but also you're going to pick with your head over your heart, and I'm going to take Liberty. They've played some better competition in my personal opinion than Coastal has. So give me Liberty in this one, and we'll see what happens. Should be a tremendous game.
It's funny you said to pick with your head over your heart, because I was about to say you got to pick with your heart over your head, so that's why I took Coastal. But we'll see which one prevails.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun to watch. And now we've come to our game of the week for this week. Number 12 Indiana is traveling to number 16 Wisconsin. Once again, this game will kick off at 3:30 Eastern time on ABC. Gonna be a super fun one here in the Big Ten. Who you got? What's your score and why?
I think no team fares in defensive slugfest better than Wisconsin typically, and that's what I foresee this game being. So I'm going to go with Wisconsin. I think they force a turnover or two out of Jack Tuttle. I think they are able to stop Stevie Scott from running the ball, which in turn doesn't allow them to take a lot of those play action vertical shots that they take with Penix's mobility and Ty Fryfogel's deep threat. And then they're going to be able to run the ball, because that's what Wisconsin does. So I'm going Wisconsin 20-13. I think this will be really competitive, and low scoring. Some really great defense in this game. But I'm going to go with the Badgers. I think they're going to have a bounce back performance, and these type of games fit their game better than it does Indiana's.
Yeah, it's just really hard for me to pick Wisconsin after watching what happened with them in Northwestern. They didn't just lose that game; they gave that game away completely to Northwestern. So it's hard for me to kind of get back behind them and see what's happening there with that team and Graham Mertz and him trying to throw the ball against this Indiana defense worries me. But so does the fact that Wisconsin runs the ball better than anyone in the country against the defense that gave up a ton on the ground to Ohio State. So interesting contrast there. I think Indiana is going to need to solidify up their run defense and commit at least an extra guy into the box on pretty much every play to make sure that they can at least slow down that running game. I think if they're able to do that, though, their secondary will prevail over Graham Mertz. And also, with that being said, Stevie Scott III is going to be the difference in this game, running the ball for Indiana. He's going to need to set up the play action pass. They're going to need to have success on the ground to settle in Jack Tuttle and allow him to make plays downfield. Give me Indiana in this one, 24-17, another low-scoring game, like you said. But it's going to be fun to watch and entertaining for sure, and still so much to play for both these teams, and a huge potential spot for Indiana as well as Wisconsin. It's going to kick off at 3:30.
Yeah, for sure. And you listed one play X factor for Indiana, and I totally agree. Stevie Scott will make an enormous difference. I just wanted to give one for Wisconsin. I think Indiana's secondary is phenomenal. So one way they can throw the ball safely is throw it to Jake Ferguson, the tight end for Wisconsin. He can work underneath, play more against the linebackers rather than that super experienced, super talented secondary that Indiana sports with 5 defensive backs. So watch for him to have a lot of targets and hopefully a big game if Wisconsin wants to win.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see. There's a lot of talent on both sides of the field. That's our game of the week. Once again, that's number 12, Indiana, traveling to number 16, Wisconsin. That's going to do it for Leif and I on this preview/news episode for college football week 14 of the College Sports Hive. Once again, Leif Tulin, I'm Scott Stevens. Let us know if you have anything else and any other final thoughts before we say goodbye, Leif.
Just have fun watching some football, stay safe, and tune in for our basketball episode coming up on Friday.
Yep, like he touched on, we'll have basketball coming on Friday to preview some tremendous matchups on Saturday. So you're going to have a great slate of college football as well as a great slate of college basketball, and we'll get you prepared for both come Friday. So we'll see you all then, and have a great rest of your day, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.